Hello and welcome, alumni, parents, and friends, to our program in lifelong learning here at Washington and Lee. This is the kickoff today of our series, our virtual learning series here, focusing on the 2015 spring term. Today we're going to start our very first of 4 sessions this spring in courses where we talk with faculty about how they're engaging students in our world. The spring term is unusual in that it's 4 weeks. The students take 1 class and they focus on a single topic, which gives them an opportunity to learn and experience things that they wouldn't be able to do in a longer semester course. Today we're here to learn about the Freedom Rides with our very own Ted DeLaney. Ted is an associate professor of history at Washington and Lee and the chair of the Africana Studies program, and also an alumnus of the class of '85. So Ted, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about the course you're teaching and the topic and what drew you to the topic to start with?
Well, the idea is just made to order for spring term, and for the 4-week spring term, I teach a course that, for want of a better word, I call the Freedom Ride. It really does not follow the route of the original Freedom Rides, but we go to the Lower South to study civil rights, and we go to all of those places that we can in a short amount of time where there were major confrontations between the status quo and civil rights activists. And so one of those places that is particularly important this year is Selma.
Right.
But this will be the 4th of the trips during spring term, and we always go to Selma, and the students really seem to always enjoy the part of the trip that is in Selma. Mm-hmm. We are reading a book written by a fairly well-known historian named Ray Arsenault, who wrote about the Freedom Rides, and this time I'm using the abridged edition. Previously, the students have read the unabridged edition, which is about that thick. Yeah. And they're also reading a book about 2 women's childhood experiences in the Selma movement. I take students pretty much into these situations where they can understand the landscape, they can understand the distance between black and white spaces, and they can understand how these places have changed over time since the civil rights movement. And certainly Selma is one of those places that has changed very, very much since the civil rights movement, with massive white flight in an area of Alabama that was overwhelmingly black, and with incredible economic difficulties, with mills closing in the town, and a fairly low median income. And so students are able to look back and see what the town was like before the civil rights movement and get some idea of what it's like now.
Right. And you mentioned that they're reading some literature. What are the other ways that you prepare them for the trip, and then what do they do when they return, or what is the sort of goal of that?
Well, preparing them for the trip is a challenge because I have not linked it to a winter term class. Some of our faculty members, like Professor Connor, link it to a winter term class, or Professor Horowitz link it to a winter term class. And the domestic trips don't draw as many students as the trips abroad. And so I have not wanted to link it to a long-term class for fear that I wouldn't have any enrollment. So 3 of my students have a good bit of preparation. Liz Longrod, for instance, took a class that I sometimes teach that is on the Jim Crow era. 2 or 3 of the students have had African American history since 1877. But then I've got 4 students who have not had that kind of background. And so we have a week on campus to prepare. So it's like a crash course in civil rights the week before we go. And the students are writing blogs. And I read a blog draft this morning with a young woman. It was a great blog. And she said she was always interested in the civil rights movement when she was in high school, but learned very little of this in high school history. And she's a junior at Washington and Lee. I don't think she's taken any other American history classes here. And so she has this keen interest, and she says in the first 3 days of this class, she's learned more civil rights than she thought she ever would. Yeah. So that's what we've been doing this week, and what we will continue to do when we get
when they're
back.
traveling, they will continue to blog and...
They will continue to blog, and they will continue to read, and we will have class on the road.
Great, great. Do you have any opportunity to interact with people on the ground that were either part of the Freedom Rides or in other areas?
Well, not only with travel, but here. 2 days ago in our class, I invited Joan Browning, who was arrested on a Freedom Ride in Albany, Georgia. Joan Browning is a native of Georgia. She is 73 years old now, but she found herself pushed into the rights movement when she was expelled from Georgia's College for Women in Milledgeville, which no longer exists, for the crime of deciding that she liked this black church better than the one she was going to, so she started going to this black church and she got expelled from college. And so it just sort of thrust her into an area that she hadn't foreseen. And so she ended up at the Highlander Folk School training for civil rights, and she becomes an activist herself as a white Southern female. So she was in our class 2 days ago, and she worked with the students for 3 hours. And we had lunch together. En route, we also run into a woman named Annie Pearl Avery in Selma, as a matter of fact, who was also a Freedom Rider, but a bit more colorful Freedom Rider. Unlike Joan, she's black, but not colorful because of race. But she's told the students before that the first Freedom Ride she attempted to go on, she didn't understand any of that nonviolent stuff, and she was kicked off the Freedom Ride when they discovered she had a switchblade. And so a side of the rights movement that you don't usually get is this idea that people are preparing to defend themselves. So it's people like that we come in contact with.
Excellent, excellent. And as we think about the 50 years since the Civil Rights Act and think about many of the things happening in our nation's cities right now, do you have an opportunity to sort of reflect upon what it is today in our race issues?
We do, and one of the things that is very, very obvious in the photojournalism of the 1960s, late 1950s, very obvious in the documentary tapes, is that the same kind of tension that existed in the South between nonviolent demonstrators and the police force are sort of, in an almost nightmarish way, playing out today. In the pictures from the 1960s, you see police dogs being turned on to nonviolent demonstrators. Or in the most horrific case in Birmingham, Alabama, where Bull Connor turns fire hoses on the demonstrators, and the water is something like 300 pounds per square inch, enough to take bark off of trees, and you're turning that on to nonviolent demonstrators. The beatings, the pictures of John Lewis, who just recently got an award at VMI, being clubbed on the Edmund Pettus Bridge with a nightstick. So there's a lot that goes on in the news from the past that seems to be strangely haunting with the images of this past year with excessive policing.
Right. And you mentioned that you've done this class before. This is the fourth time that you've done this?
It is the fourth time.
How has it evolved or changed? And what have students said that was really impactful for them, primarily about being able to do this course in the spring term?
One of the things that students oftentimes have said that was a real eye-opener for them, and I guess it would be an eye-opener for anybody of any age who had not taken this trip and who's not read the things that they're reading. The thing that seems to hit them the most are the really well-done museums. And there are some museums in the South that are just extraordinary. One that comes to mind that at first was a really poor museum, but certainly the best now, is the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. And one of the things about it and the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, for instance, is they're interactive museums, high-tech, very modern museums that are also challenging a person's intellect while they're there. And so students can see documentary evidence for various things exhibited in those museums as well. And the one in Memphis, they have the adjacent building across the street that they have opened up, which is where the assassin was perched to kill Martin Luther King. And all the police forensics evidence is in that building. So if you're really interested in the case against James Earl Ray, you can read all the police stuff in that building. So there is a lot of stuff that certainly engages them intellectually and makes them think about what happened. And probably the best thing that I hear from students, and not all of them, but some students, is that sometimes they say it's the best course they ever took.
Yeah.
And that makes me feel like I'm doing something right.
Yeah,
but,
that's great. That's great.
And the other part of this that I'd like to point out is that this year I'm going with 7, and I have 5 women and 2 men. 2 of the men, well, both men are white Southerners, which is unique. The first year I had 2 men along who were white Southerners. But this is the first time that I've had more than 1 black student, and I actually have 2 black female students this time among the 5 women students. So each time the class has been majority white, and the composition has been both Northern and Southern students. And so don't get a lot of interest in it, but I couldn't handle a lot of students. We'd have to have another faculty member.
And do you think, I mean, do you try to engage them amongst the group themselves to have conversations that are challenging things around race and to help engage them in that topic?
Absolutely. And of course, some of the stuff is really uncomfortable to talk about, even in a classroom at Washington and Lee, say during African American history since 1877. There was so much to focus on this year, and the stuff that was out there in the news was so depressing a great deal of the time. But usually what happens is that the kids who are in these courses have self-selected for these courses anyway. And so they are the students who seem to be most interested and most engaged in these issues that tend to be very sensitive.
Right. Ted, thank you so much. So is there anything else, I mean, in terms of the spring term, what's meaningful for you in terms of being able to teach in this kind of format and these sort of topics?
Well, one of the things that is just incredible to me is that the opportunity is there to do this. And I've just had a great time. It's typical Washington Lee class because you have this special relationship between faculty and students. And in this situation, I'm eating 3 meals a day with the students. And usually I retire to my room after dinner to proofread their blogs because I don't want anything out there that's going to come back to embarrass them. And
are they available for others to see, or are they private?
Absolutely. And in the past, Jessica Willett has linked them to the university webpage. I know she's going to put some selective blogs on this year, but the history department webpage will have a link to the blog, as well as hopefully the Africana Studies webpage.
Good, and that's going to be great for others to be able to travel.
So all people need to do is go to the history department or to the Africana Studies website and look for those links. And so far, there have been people who've already liked the blog, and we have also set up a Facebook page for this class this year, which is something we haven't done before. And there are a lot of alumni so far who've liked the Facebook page.
Great. Well, good luck to you on your trip, and we're looking forward to hearing more about it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and look for our next series, our next rendition of the series of virtual learning at Washington and Lee.